Donald Trump imposed more than 1,000 sanctions on Iran as president, but one of them could prove to be a poison pill that derails an effort by his successor to revive the 2015 nuclear deal designed to prevent Iran from building an atomic bomb. Trump withdrew the U.S. from the deal in 2018 and blacklisted Iran's Revolutionary Guards, a powerful arm of the Iranian military, as a foreign terrorist organization in 2019. Now negotiations aimed at renewing the nuclear deal are at an impasse over the sanction, with Iran demanding the Biden administration lift the U.S. terrorism designation, according to a current official and 3 sources familiar with the discussions. The discussions between Iran and world powers came tantalizingly close to clinching an agreement in late February, but became bogged down after Russia raised fresh concerns and as Iranian officials pushed for the lifting of the terrorism designation on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, the sources said. The Biden administration offered a proposal to lift the designation in return for assurances from Iran not to retaliate against U.S. officials for the 2020 killing of a top Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, who died in a U.S. drone strike in Baghdad, the sources told NBC News. Iran rejected the proposal and responded about 2 weeks ago with a counterproposal, the details of which remain unclear. The Biden administration has yet to respond formally to the Iranian counterproposal, the sources said. The ball is in Biden's court, said one source briefed on the discussions. Now administration officials are debating how to proceed, knowing that lifting the terrorism label would spark a scathing reaction in Congress and among Middle East allies. There's no doubt that this is a Trump trap for Biden, said Ali Vaiz, of the International Crisis Group, a think tank. The irony is the current stalemate was deliberately pre-manufactured by the Trump administration to put their successor exactly where they are right now, said Vaiz, a strong supporter of the 2015 Iran deal. A senior Biden administration official suggested it was up to Iran to resolve the impasse. We are not going to negotiate in public. The president has made clear he'll do what's in the best interest of U.S. security, and the onus here is really on Iran at this stage, particularly on this issue. Iran's UN mission did not respond to a request for comment. The 2015 deal, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or JCPOA, imposed strict limits on Iran's nuclear program in return for an easing of economic sanctions, including releasing Iranian funds blocked in foreign banks. In 2018, Trump pulled the U.S. out of the JCPOA and reimposed U.S. sanctions while adding new sanctions as well. Critics accused the Trump administration of intentionally introducing poison pill sanctions that would make it difficult for the next president to restore the accord. But officials at the time said the sanctions were designed to hammer Iran as part of a maximum pressure campaign to force more concessions from Tehran and to weaken the regime. Richard Goldberg, who served in the Trump White House National Security Council and strongly opposes reviving the JCPOA, said the impetus for imposing additional sanctions against the Revolutionary Guards and other entities initially came from Congress, before the Trump administration pulled the U.S. out of the nuclear deal. In 2015, when President Barack Obama's administration made the case for the deal, officials said the U.S. would retain the authority to impose sanctions on Iran unrelated to its nuclear program, including targeting organizations allegedly supporting terrorism. In 2017, lawmakers from both parties backed legislation that introduced new sanctions on Iran and laid the foundation for a U.S. president to sanction the Revolutionary Guards. Former Obama administration officials at the time argued against the legislation, warning it could undermine the formula underpinning the 2015 nuclear deal. The broader problem here is the Obama administration was adamant that nothing could prevent the U.S. from imposing terrorism, missile and human rights sanctions, said Goldberg, now a senior advisor at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a think tank. Congress decided to test the proposition, he said, and now the Biden administration is grappling with the aftermath. After nearly a year of negotiations, Iran and the U.S., Britain, France, Germany, Russia and China managed to mostly resolve the question of which sanctions would be lifted in accordance with the original deal, except for the blacklisting of the IRGC. The U.S. government has accused the Revolutionary Guards of killing hundreds of U.S. troops in Iraq and supplying weapons and training to proxy forces in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Past 2 decades, the U.S. has introduced an array of sanctions against the IRGC and individuals in the force over its ballistic missile program and alleged terrorism and human rights violations. Most former officials and regional analysts say lifting the terrorism designation on the IRGC would have little practical effect, as the organization would remain under a myriad of other U.S. sanctions. But the move carries potent political symbolism for Iran, for the United States, and for Iran's foes in the Middle East. As for possible domestic political reaction in the United States, the Biden administration recognizes they would get creamed if the terrorism designation was lifted without conditions, one former U.S. official said. Jettisoning the designation presents a messaging problem at a difficult moment, according to Matthew Levitt of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy think tank.